Salutations, mortals. This is Oken, published poet, creative entrepreneur, but most importantly, host of the From the Jump podcast. From the Jump is a podcast mainly focusing on the humanization of creatives to their respective and or potential audiences through honest, unscripted, and unfiltered conversations with another creative, the host. So let us be your entry point to this exciting journey. But first, we'd like to give a special shout out to the Sounds of the World podcast, hosted by Hillary and William, for serving us a feast of in-depth global interactions of music around the globe.
Welcome to the Sounds of the World. We are your hosts, Hillary and Bill.
Together, we're going to travel around the world to discover new music, discuss musical topics, and interview fascinating people.
Our world is a buffet of music, and it is time to eat. Hey everybody, this is Bill.
And this is Hillary.
From Sounds of the World podcast. And we just want to remind you that if you live in the United States, to make sure to get registered to vote. November 3rd is election day. In these states, as September goes into October, registration to be dates are expiring soon. So make sure that you check your state official rules, get registered to vote, and make sure you go out to vote. This is a pivotal election for everybody. So make sure that you do this. This is our civic duty.
It's so important. You may feel like your voice doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. Let your voice be heard. Get your ass out there and go vote.
Yeah, do it. And after you're done, go get some beer. All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Sounds of the World. Today's a special day. First off, a couple things. We've had a couple people ask. We do have a Patreon now, so if you want to donate as little as $1, help us out. We are independently funded and out of our own pockets to get this going, so any help would be great. You'll have access to extended interviews, free merch when we get this going. And a few other things that we want to keep a surprise for everyone who wants to join Patreon. It is also International Podcast Day, so congratulations to everyone who's a podcaster and who's working on it. My big heroes are the Wine and Crime gals. Today is also actually Amanda from Wine and Crime's birthday, so happy birthday! So, okay, enough with the plugging. So on today's episode, we have a distinct honor to speak with a composer who's from Japan, but he now resides in Germany. I met this composer while I was in Krakow, Poland, attending a performance that included a work from each of us. We stayed at the same hostel and just talked about life, music, and traveling while eating vast amounts of pierogies, which are delicious. His works are described to, quote, engage in repetitive patterns of sound motives, which aims for the slightest change in the pattern to act as an accent, and as a flared infotainment playground. I love that one, infotainment playground. He was born in Osaka, Japan, but spent his formative years in Singapore. He received his professional diploma in piano performance with high honors at 12 and began studying computer music and composition with Shintaro Imai and Motoharu Kawashima at the Kunitachi College of Music in Tokyo. He graduated with the Arima Prize, which is the highest recognition for a graduating class. He then went on to receive his MFA from Columbia in New York City, where he studied with Brad Garton and Zosha DeGastri at the Computer Music Center. He's since gone on to study at the Hochschule for Musik Karl Maria von Weber under the tutelage of Marc Andre, Stefan Prinz, and Jorn Peter Heikel. In 2016, he was the first prize winner of the Malta International Composition Competition. His music has gone on to be performed worldwide. He's also the active researcher in the compositional approaches of the show and has conducted numerous lectures and demonstrations regarding the notation and extended techniques of this ancient Japanese instrument at such universities as Cornell, Manhattan School of Music, the University of Hawaii Manoa, Conservatorio de Puerto Rico, and many, many more. Today, we're going to talk about this fascinating instrument, the show, and how to fuse together its traditions with contemporary music. It's a great honor to be able to talk with him today. Please welcome Chatori Shimizu.
Hello.
Thank you so much, Chatori, for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
That's quite the background. It's so, to me, it sounds like such a big, lofty background, and yet you're still so personable and easy to talk to.
Thank you.
First off, like, we were born in Osaka, and then how long did you live in Singapore?
So, I actually spent my formative years in Thailand and Singapore. And
okay.
Yeah, I returned to Japan for high school and college. Quite a long time in Singapore, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And about 6 years in Tokyo, then moved to New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, before moving to Dresden in Germany, which is where I am now. My life has been just constant moving.
Movement's good. I mean, you've seen so much of the world so far, so.
Yeah. I mean, I really think that I've had the privilege to actually, see many parts of the world and experience a lot of different cultures.
Right. And I hear Singapore is amazing. It's such a big city-state, pretty much, right?
Yeah, it's quite diverse. The weather's very nice. It's a very, very good country to grow up in, I think.
So it says you got your piano at 12, right? So did you start piano super young?
Yeah, so I started piano when I was 4 years old, and I got my professional piano diploma when I was 12.
Wow.
Yeah, but after that, something kind of snapped in me, So I was really trained in a very rigorous way in the piano performance. I had to practice every day for hours in front of the piano and stuff. So yeah, after I got my professional diploma, I kind of drifted away from piano. Yeah, perhaps you know the feeling, during your teenage years. You kind of have this rebel phase.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah,
I mean, that's completely understandable. My God, you had your professional piano diploma at 12. That's amazing. I mean, if you've done it all by 12, you got to go somewhere else too, right?
Yep, that's right.
And so was it from piano that you, like the boredom of piano, you kind of got interested in other things or in composition, or how did composition come into the picture?
How did composition come into the picture? So I was a very quiet kid. Perhaps I can put it this way. Definitely not one of the popular ones. In fact, I think I've always been having issues with people, either somebody else bullying me and stuff like that. But that aside, as I said, I had one thing that I could do, which nobody else could really do, which is playing the piano. So one time I received this opportunity to play the piano in front of the whole school, and then started to notice that although I was bad at talking to people at that time, I could create the starting point of a conversation through music. So, I started digging deeper into this. I was kind of bored with playing classical music, to be honest. So I started to improvise on the piano. But I noticed that when you improvise on the piano, it's like a one-time thing. If you don't record it or if you don't notate it, you're never going to play the same improvisation again in your life.
Right.
So then I started studying music theory, notation, recording techniques and stuff. And that's the beginning where I started to get into composition.
And so was this kind of hybridizing electronic music and piano, or was electronic music on your radar already?
Yeah, so I've always been like a computer geek. Yeah. I mean, I loved computers, and I loved not so much the hardware part, but the software part. Yeah, I thought it was really cool that you could create sound from nothing. That's where I started to get into computer music. So yeah, I studied computer music in my bachelor's degree in college and in grad school too, in the sound arts program at Columbia.
So what type of computer music did you get into? Like music concrete, like working with recordings and manipulating those, or were you more interested in like synthesizing your own music and creating your own sounds?
So
Or a little bit of both. I know they go hand in hand.
yeah, it's a mixture of everything, I should say. In my undergraduate studies, I studied Max MSP in depth, which...
Oh, I loved Max in college.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't remember anything from my undergraduate
I remember
years.
loving it at the moment, but after I was done with it, it was like, oh, I don't remember how to do any of that.
Yeah. But to be honest, right now I don't really work with computer music. I don't really make pure electronic music, because after getting exposed to a lot of electronic or computer music for years, I've started to notice when I hear different works, I can hear which software they're using, which plugins they're using. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so right now I'm trying to dig deeper into the instrumental composition, which is probably like the opposite path that composers take.
Yeah, you must have heard a lot to be able to decipher between Max MSP and all those other ones.
I mean, 6 years in school is a long time.
I feel like they have to be designed in a certain way where you hear one of those works and you go, okay, there's no way this was done in a DAW. Like this had to be triggered randomly or by some programming. I think that really lends well over into instrumental music though, because I think you get a lot of valuable training in these different mindsets. Okay, how can I create this world with the tools that I have? What notation do I need to use? I think it translates quite well.
Yeah, I think so. I really think so too. So the first time that I really could tell which software or which plugin they were using in an electronic music that I heard was that, do you guys know the IRCOM verb?
Yeah, IRCOM, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are a
Yes.
lot of reverbs that people can use. There are preset reverbs on Pro Tools, on Logic, but there's this really expensive plugin called the IRCOM verb, where IRCOM developed. I really liked the sound of it. Of course, I couldn't afford it myself, so I used it. I used to use it on my school computer.
And just so anyone is curious, IRCOM is the Institute for Research in Computer and Acoustic Music in Paris, France. It's by the Centre Pompidou and the Stravinsky Fountain in downtown Paris. It's amazing. So you're able to hear the IRCOM verb, and then what happened later on? So you were able to then you started inputting acoustic music and electronic music in your own way, or what happened?
So for instrumental music, I feel like there's so much more to explore. I know that some composers, especially younger composers, they say that all of the techniques or all of the compositional styles are already drained by previous composers. But I don't really think so. I think there's a lot that we can still find in different instruments, not just European orchestral instruments, but instruments around the world too.
Yeah, I mean, that was always a thought I had was as I was writing, it's like, is this just rehashing someone else, or like how far can I really push the violin or the flute? So, and so
Yeah, I
as
think every composer has that moment where you want to be new and creative and different, but at some point, I think you can be new and creative and different within the same boundaries, because I feel like a lot of us feel like we have to push these boundaries to get on the map or to create music that'll be heard, but you can really do a lot. I really like what you're saying, because I feel like you can do a lot with what's already been done, but you can hash it in a way that's unique to you, or maybe highlight something that hasn't been highlighted before. Perhaps it's been seen, but perhaps it hasn't been highlighted or discovered, with air quotes, in a way that you have a visual on it.
And this might sound like a counter interview to you guys, but do you guys think that we as composers, we must always produce something new? Because I'm also debating myself on that. I mean, the definition new is a very controversial term, I think. I mean, anyone can argue what new means. So yeah, as composers, what do you guys think?
I think it was Steve Reich that said it. There's still plenty of good music to be composed in the key of C. I think new is kind of where you have to draw up your definition. And maybe in my mind, I'm thinking of good music or music that I'd like to hear. But I don't think you always have to go for something new. I think you can kind of create something that has been already done, but do it super well, and maybe put your own spin on it. That would make me want to listen or tune in and be like, oh, I've heard this style before, but I've never heard it quite like that.
I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking too, is that like, new is such a, abstract idea. So for me, I might be writing in sonata form, or in, like, I just finished 2 pieces that was like a tarantella, a toccata. Like, they're old forms, but I used my own aesthetic and my own techniques and manipulated it in a different way that still achieves those kinds of standardized ideas of what a toccata or a tarantella is. So I think if you were always creating something new, even if it's on the footprints of old things.
I feel like some composers or some musicians, when they use the term new, they're actually referring to this movement of finding beauty in parentheses, of course, but finding beauty in the destruction of the Western traditional theoretical structures. For example, noise music or free jazz. I think that's cool, like finding beauty in the destruction of the traditional Western theoretical structures. That could be something new too. But I also feel that we don't have to create new music in this path too. Like, this isn't the only path.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
So is that when you started introducing the show, or was the show something you had always been interested in, or?
Yeah, so I really had this big privilege to study with Mayumi Miyata, who is the pioneer to bring show into contemporary music. Yeah, she's really my hero. And in college, she was my professor for show.
Okay.
So aside from the traditional repertoires in gagaku, which is the Japanese court music, I could really talk to her a lot about show in the context of Western art music too. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that my pursuit of the show in the context of Western art music, using show in composition, it started when I was in my undergrad in Tokyo.
Maybe you could just describe what the show looks like for our listeners too, because I mean, I think I read somewhere that they call it like a large mouth organ, but yeah. I mean, maybe you can describe it much more eloquently than Wikipedia can.
Yeah, so The sho is a Japanese free reed mouth organ. It's believed that scholars believe that this instrument was imported into Japan from the Tang Dynasty China around the 8th century, maybe the 7th to the 8th century.
Wow.
Through the Korean Peninsula. So in Japan, we call it the sho. In China, in Chinese, they call it the sheng. And in Korea, it's called the senghwan. Apologies if I'm butchering the pronunciation in other languages.
I already butchered the Japanese names, so
yeah, and it has 17 vertical bamboo pipes, and it's a chord instrument, and you can breathe in or breathe out and create the same sounds, just like a harmonica or a church pipe organ.
And so, what drew you to the show in your studies?
So, aside from the fact that Mayumi Miyata was teaching at Kunitachi, one of my very close friends in the undergraduate years, he was a foreign student. He was an exchange student from Denmark. He was actually the one who reintroduced me to the show, I should say. Because in reality, in Japan, the traditional instruments are very out of touch from the majority of the public. Yeah, many of the young people, or even I can say the older generations too, post-war older generations, we are really out of touch of the traditional Japanese music, especially the court music. When my Danish friend played this instrument, I was really shocked that I haven't rediscovered this instrument. I haven't used this instrument in composition.
Yeah, I mean, I would think.
Yeah, I guess that was the start of my interest.
And then, I mean, it's a cool instrument. You said it's a chord, like it produces chords, correct?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Is it optional? Like, is there opportunity to create melodic line, or is it all kind of just like multiple pitches at once, or is it singular pitches?
So on show, yes, it's possible to play individual notes or a melodic line, but how it's used in the traditional repertoires in the court music, most of it is played with chords, and that's because of the instrumental structure and how the fingering is set. It's very, very difficult to play melodic lines on this instrument.
So the bamboo pipes, they have holes on them. Now, do the holes change the pitch of the pipes and stuff, or?
So each pipe has only one sound.
Okay.
So there's 17 bamboo pipes on the show, meaning that there can be at maximum 17 different pitches. In gagaku, only 15 of the 17 pipes are equipped with reeds, meaning that only 15 sounds are used in gagaku. 15 pitches are used in gagaku.
And so how do you control which pipes are played?
So you can just place your finger on top of the finger hole, and then you can either breathe in or breathe out, and that makes a sound.
Okay. So it's like the holes are like the stops on an organ?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I would think that, I was thinking a couple of things where, because you said it was for gagaku, or the high court kind of music, the art of breathing in and out would make it very almost meditative.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, yeah.
I mean, couple that with maybe like shakuhachi, and I mean, what kind of in the gakuku, what were all the instruments involved in this? I mean,
so again, it's a chord instrument. The interesting thing is that in a gagaku orchestra, there are wind instruments, there are percussion instruments, and there are also string instruments, plucked string instruments. And in either European music or, in jazz, the rhythm section consisting of, let's say, a drum set or a upright bass or a piano, they're the ones setting the rhythm. In a Western European orchestra, it's the conductor counting the beat on the podium in front of the orchestra. But For the gagaku orchestra, the show is actually the ones who are setting the tempo of the repertoires. How it's done is that, as I said, the show, you can make sound on the show while breathing in or breathing out. The point where you change the breath from breathing in to breathing out, or vice versa, that point is called kigae. All of the instrumentalists hear the swelling towards the kigae, and that is, I guess you can say that is one cycle of the breath that people are keeping conscious about.
And then, so as they would hear the cycle of the breath going, they would kind of feel like a tempo or something?
Yeah, I guess you can call it a tempo.
That's amazing. So you really have to be, like, if you're playing in that ensemble, you really have to be listening as that cycles in and out. Because I feel like maybe if you were zoning out, you'd miss it. Because with our, you're not looking for the conductor waving his arm and spacing out and then seeing it out of the corner of your eye. Oh, okay, that's beat 4. I'm coming in on 1. But with that, I'm like, wow, what focus you'd have to just really be connected. And that's really cool.
Have you guys heard of the different time identity theories?
Ooh, not off the top of my head.
Yeah, not that I can think of.
Okay, that is great. That is great because it's something that I've published this year, and the fact that you haven't heard of it means that I haven't copied anyone else's concepts.
Like just a deep sigh, like I'm in the clear.
Yeah, I was worried. I was like, I have a PhD. Maybe I should know this answer.
No, I'm glad that you guys didn't know about this because it's not a popular theory in music theory or musicology. Because in academia around the world, including East Asia, music education is, of course, heavily based on Western music. We learn the 18th century and onwards European music theory in our curriculums in conservatories and universities all around the world. This concept of time identity. So I've been going to a lot of underground noise shows in Tokyo when I was a college student. And
that sounds amazing.
Improvisation. Yeah, they were really something's very different from what I write on the score, what I notate on the score nowadays.
Absolutely. I remember hearing noise music for the first time. And I'm just thinking for our listeners, if you've never heard what noise music is, throw it into Google and click YouTube, find something, and it's really just, it will transform your perspective on music.
And in noise music, I really felt a different time flow of music. Like it's not the same with a European orchestra, for example. So, but at that time, I still didn't have enough vocabularies and knowledge to explain my concepts of different time flows. And so I was, digging deeper into compositions. In this case, I'm talking about compositions of European orchestral instruments notated on the 5-line Western notation system, while simultaneously exploring, gagaku music too. And I really saw this clear time identity differences between the European music and the gagaku music. So I'm not a musicologist, but I thought perhaps theorizing the different time identities that I have encountered from a compositional or notational perspective, it's possible. It just has a different time identity. I call the post-Baroque conventional Western notation systems time identity a metronomic time identity. And I call the gagaku time a chronometric time identity. Yeah. As a Western art music composer, I have a lot of difficulties actually notating the show on Western notation system, just because this time flow, it just can't be notated. It can't fit into the Western notation system.
So I feel like Western notation's so rigid, which I mean, someone could argue with me about that, and we could definitely talk till we were blue in the face, but traditional Western notation, when you think about it, is just super rigid. I mean, I immediately think 4/4, 3/4, and you can go crazy with the meters all you like, but the basis of that is there's still a meter involved. So yeah, sorry, I'm just like trying to think how I would do it. My brain's like trying to look for ideas and like, oh, I'd really have to spend some time on this.
Yeah. And the ones that I listed, the metronomic and the chronometric, it's around the world. I'm sure that there are just many other time identities that we just haven't encountered yet, or we just don't know about it. We're just not educated in that path. So yeah, it's really a exploration, knowing different music, different cultures.
I mean, that's kind of that's the main reason. One of the reasons we have this podcast is just to educate not just ourselves, but anyone interested. You know, we liken it to a buffet. You know, like there's so much out there. It's just can't just live off of McDonald's and the same thing over time. You know.
I know. I think I wasn't really introduced, or I just kind of had no idea. You don't know what you don't know until I took like a world music class my senior year in my undergrad. And then after that, I felt like my head cracked open and I was like, oh my gosh, I've only even like looked at the surface of what's out there. It's very humbling, but also really exciting because you think, okay, there's, like I said, there's so many more different things we can pull in and learn and explore that quote unquote have already been done, but how can we blend these together or pull new things from them or see them from different cultural perspectives? I'm really excited to see where your time theory goes.
Yeah.
And so because of your chronometric and metric time ideas, I mean, how do you, because you do use the show in actual contemporary composition, so how do you combine those kinds of ideas?
Okay, that's a really good question. And I think it's the most difficult question that you've asked me today.
Woohoo!
Well, first of all, as I touched on just a bit, I view contemporary music as Western art music. I'm sure that there are many differing opinions on this, but I view the modern day Western art music as a development of what used to be, the classical or Baroque, or we can even go further back into the Roman and Greek music, this music lineage. If we can use that term, has really transformed over time in the areas of notation or rhythm, culture surrounding the music, and so on. But when we look at sho, for example, it has been used in the context of gagaku for more than 1,300 years. And although throughout history there were minor changes, such as the tempo of the repertoires or the instrumentation used in gagaku orchestras, I think it's fair to say that sho, I think I can explain it this way. Sho has been respectfully fulfilling its duty in the gagaku orchestra. And while a European orchestral instrument has been going on adventures, today's European orchestral instruments, for example, let's say the cello or a violin, it really makes sense for Lachenmann to use certain techniques because there is already a philosophical, cultural, and aesthetical grounds to that. Whereas if we want to use the sho in the context of Western art music, that actually means that we suddenly hit the wall of questions asking us, why are we using the sho and not other instruments like the harmonica or the pipe organ?
Right.
We use non-traditional techniques on the sho, not found in gagaku. Then the questions are, what are the reasons for that? Those questions are really difficult to answer. I don't think I have an answer to your question. How do you fuse, the sho and contemporary music? But it's just something that we have to keep trying, keep experimenting. The sho was first introduced, I should say, into the context of Western art music in the 1950s. the post-war period.
Okay.
And it's not even 100 years since then. But when we look at Western orchestral instruments, how it's been used in the compositional context, it has a longer history. So I feel like now is the time where composers are really trying to figure out a way, experimenting with the instruments, not of the European orchestral instruments, and to borrow your words, combine, to fuse it into the Western art music.
When the first time I heard it, it's kind of mind-boggling. It kind of, something I had never heard before, and it sounded so different. I don't want to say alien but it was alien to someone who's not familiar with that kind of environment, with that the instruments of Asia.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. When we hear gagaku music, it's not just the non-Japanese people, but also people in Japan who think it's new, to borrow your words, different from what we're familiar with. Because, unfortunately, we are so out of touch from our own heritage music. To my ears, too, the very first time that I heard gagaku live, it was really shocking. It was really a new experience for me.
When I look at, because you have some pieces that you've put up on YouTube and things, you use this, our standard, the Western classical standard 5 lines and things, but there you always use a lot of free kind of time. Like, so I would assume that you're kind of using the Western classical ideas and then fusing that with your chronometric time ideas.
Yeah, to me, I find, I know it's a subjective term, but I'll use this word beauty. I find beauty in this chronometric time identity. It's more freeing. It's more natural to me to hear. I guess I can say that it's more natural. It gives more freedom to the performers too, which is very important for me when I'm composing contemporary music.
We just recently interviewed Sean Head, and he was talking about with shakuhachi, there's so many open elements to it. So whether you're playing, I can't remember the word he used for F, but he's like, if I want to play that pitch, I have like 5 different ways of actually playing that pitch in just the pitch itself, and then he has all these other choices he can make as to, volume and attack, breathiness of the pitch. And so this must be, on one side as a composer, I'm just like, oh, that sounds like such a fresh breath of air to be able to just like hand over some of that responsibility to the performers. But then as a performer, it terrifies me, because that's a lot of responsibility. You grow up learning not to put your own aesthetic into it, and you just write or you play what's written down on the page.
Yeah, and I was also classically trained, and I also feel like classical music nowadays, it's really all about playing what's written on the score. There aren't too much areas where you can just explore and show your colors as musicians compared to other genres. But when we really think about the time when classical music, even Baroque or before that, the music that we rigorously follow the scores today, there were a lot of improvisations happening during the time of Mozart or Beethoven. Yeah, they were known as great improvisers on the piano.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it's very important to really perhaps go back and actually know that it's okay to give more freedom to the performers. It doesn't really have to be this really rigorous, rigid, read off the score and play perfectly what's written on the score.
Yeah, I would think it'd be kind of akin to jazz performance, in that, you know, they have like their standard, you know, they have charts that they need to learn and things, you know, whether it's All of Me or, you know, and but then they're given so much freedom, you know, during with the solo sections or whatever, where even, you know, you hear All of Me and there's 50 different versions of that one piece. You know, it's interesting that in like there's not 50 different versions of Eine kleine Nachtmusik or Symphony Number 5 by Beethoven, or, you know what I mean?
Like for gagaku music, the tempo isn't set, so we don't really have a tempo indication, or we don't have a time signature in an equivalent sense of European art music. We do have a time signature, but it's very different. Time can fluctuate on the third and the fourth beats. So it's a very different concept of time. What does that mean? That means each performance of the same piece can have different lengths.
I remember having kind of that conversation in my doctorates, and like, well, I kind of want to let the performers just take their time and, you know, like not write down, dictate all of the, you know, crescendi and decrescendi and where they go to and stuff, you know. For people interested in the instrument, what should they know about writing it into a contemporary classical music?
Okay, that is another very difficult question. Yeah, I mean, there isn't a correct answer for that. For people interested in composing for show, I believe that, you know, listening to gagaku repertoires is a good start. And, you know, aside from knowing the notation, the fingering, and all the other technical points, again, I'd like to stress the importance of different time flows in different music or different instruments. When I'm talking about time identities, I bring this topic into linguistics too, different languages. As I said before, I lived in a lot of different countries, so I speak several languages, and languages are really, really intertwined with cultures. So there are a lot of pauses in between conversations or in between words in the Japanese language, in the Japanese communication culture, so to speak. And when we look at Japanese music, for example, there are a lot of silence in between sounds. I mean, we put more importance on silence than, let's say, French music of the 18th century. That's very specific.
Oh, you can say Americans at that.
Or American, yeah. But then when I speak English in the United States, having silence in between words, it's considered awkward. It's just a cultural difference.
Very.
Yeah. In Japan, if we just keep talking, people might think that you're not as smart or you're shallow.
Oh, wow.
In many cases. But that's not the case in the United States. It's actually the opposite from my experience. If you have a lot of silences in between words and sentences, then people won't take you too seriously. Yeah, so languages are really intertwined with cultures, and I do see many similarities in the music which sprouted out from the land where the cultures and the languages are there. So I don't know. If you have the time and the motivation, perhaps learning Japanese could be one big step to really understanding the different time identities used in gagaku music.
Yeah, I was thinking about how I had one of my good friends' father was a philosophy professor, and he liked to take time as he spoke to really collect his words. And, you know, in speech classes that we have to take, we're told to, if you need to, take a pause, gather yourself, and then say what you need to say, rather than doing what I do a lot and just say a lot. And so whereas you get out into the world and you start talking, and people just want to go, and if there's this kind of sweet spot where you're not talking super fast, so it doesn't feel like you're, selling someone something or trying to, throw a blanket over their eyes, but you're not taking so much time within your speech pattern that people start losing interest, and kind of how that correlates to American music. We've got in C, the piece in C, and then you've got, of course, minimalism and the constant perpetual motion of some American music. But then on the other spectrum, you've got George Crumb. His pieces, they have definite silence. There's it's metered. So, it's metered in the way that it's like 4 seconds of silence or 12 seconds, and the silence is used as a technique rather than something else. And so I just thought that was really interesting. I never really kind of collaborated those ideas together,
Yeah.
The show and your aesthetic. You just, even the way you speak is very, paced. Excuse me. You take time, you thought out. So with, I believe you sent us an MP3 of a piece, and that has in itself like breaks between the parts, between the show and its interacting instruments. And I saw another one with a show and viola, right? And I remember like the show would play a chord that built up and then it kind of stopped and evaporated into the ether. And then the viola came in with its own voice, and just how those all mixed together, I thought was, a very beautiful
Thank you.
combination.
I found a very interesting thing. I think it was in 2018, 2 years ago, that I did an extensive spectral analysis of the sounds of the show. And I was fascinated to find out that the spectral analysis showed that the sound of the show is very similar to the sound of a viola with a rubber mute on. So yeah, that was the reason that I chose these two instruments. It was the show and a viola with the rubber mute on.
So, all right, wonderful. It was so nice talking to you, Chatori, about the show.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And thank you for being so flexible and working with us. We're going to do a little kind of what we call the after party. So if anyone wants to listen to those, make sure you're signed on to our Patreon, and you can listen to our after party interview and further discussion with Chatori about everything from the show to composition to a piece. So sign on and we'll talk to you then. All right, thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Sounds of the World podcast.
I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll have links to everything in our description. So please follow those links and give them likes and subscriptions. Like we like to say, the world is a buffet of music, and it's time to eat. So go eat and enjoy and discover.
And on that note, I'm going to go have a bite and maybe a beer.
Hey, there you go. Bye.
Bye.